welcome to Storytime with Fairy Tales and Pirate Tales. Today we'll be reading about my good friend Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. Once, there was a pretty little girl called Snow White. She lived in a palace with the Queen. The Queen was pretty too, but not as pretty as Snow White. The Queen did not like Snow White. The Queen had a magic mirror. Every day she asked it, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the prettiest of them all?" One day the mirror replied, "Snow White is the prettiest." The Queen was very cross. "Take Snow White away," she cried. The hunter took Snow White into the woods. "Run away, Snow White," he said. "Why? What have I done?" asked Snow White. "The Queen does not like you," he said. "Run away and hide." Snow White ran away into the woods. Soon, Snow White was lost in the woods. It was beginning to get dark when she found a path. She followed the path in the moonlight. She could see a little house. There was no one home. Inside there were 7 little chairs and 7 little beds. Snow White felt so tired, she lay down and fell asleep. When she woke up, she saw 7 friendly dwarves. "Who are you?" they asked. Snow White told them her story and began to cry. "But you can live here with us," they happily said. "Don't be sad," said the 7 dwarves. "We will look after you." Snow White was very happy living with the dwarves. Every day, the dwarves went to work. "Be careful not to talk to strangers," they warned her. Snow White was happy living with the dwarves. Every day, the dwarves went to work. "Be careful not to talk to strangers," they warned her. "They may not be who they pretend to be." Snow White looked after the dwarves' little house and their big garden. One day, the wicked queen asked her magic mirror who the prettiest was right now. Again, the mirror said, "Snow White." The queen was angry. She put poison on an apple. The queen visited the little house in the woods. She pretended to be an old woman selling apples. Snow White took the poisoned apple. Snow White ate the apple and fell to the ground. When the dwarves came home, they thought Snow White was dead. They put her in a glass case and carried it to the top of a hill. The dwarves were very sad. Before long, a prince rode by. He stopped when he saw Snow White. "Who is she?" he asked. The dwarves told him her story. The prince lifted the lid from the glass case. Snow White looked so pretty that the prince kissed her. Suddenly, Snow White gasped and spat out the bad apple. The prince asked Snow White to marry him. "I would be very happy to marry you," said Snow White. The prince took her back to the palace. All the dwarfs went to the wedding. The wicked queen was not invited, and they never saw her again. They all lived happily ever after. And that's the end of our story. Thank you for listening to my friend's story, Snow White and the 7 Dwarves. We'll see you tomorrow night. Good night.